feel honored that you're here with us. And hopefully in recording it, we can get it out to as many parents as possible as well. So let's just jump right in and get started. So at MADD, we always start all of our programs with what we call our mission moment. And it's really why we do what we do. We can stand here and give you facts and figures, but really when we tell you the stories of the people who've really been impacted by underage drinking, marijuana use, and drunk driving, that's what's really impactful. So we always like to start with the mission moment and share stories from teens who have heard their parents have come to MADD because of underage drinking or drunk driving. So I'm going to share the story of Casey first, as told by his mother, and then Brooke will share the story of Olivia. So I'm just going to read it off my phone here. Casey, my eldest, was what you would call a good kid, on the honor roll, in marching band and choir. He wrestled and played football. Casey's father had a drinking problem, and Casey knew it contributed to our divorce. That gave me a false sense of security. I believed he had seen the problems alcohol could cause firsthand, and that he would not drink. I believed he was mature enough to not drink, to know drinking was wrong. Casey was 18 the night he and his friend stopped at a drive-up liquor establishment that didn't card underage buyers. They bought rum and decided it would be fun to see how much just one person could chug. That person was Casey. Around noon the next day, a police officer came to my door to tell me that Casey was dead. It took 2 days for the coroner to confirm that Casey's blood alcohol content was 0.41, more than 4 times the drunk driving limit for an adult. If I had to do it all over again, I would have made my message very clear. When I found that bottle of rum Casey had hidden in our garage, I would not have thrown it away and said nothing like I did. I would have taken it out on the counter, set it down on the table, and had a conversation. We would have discussed why I did not want him drinking. I would have spoken to him about alcohol more often. And that's the story of Casey as told by his mom. And now Brooke is going to share Olivia's story.
So this is from Olivia's mother. Her name is Lisa. My daughter Olivia didn't wake up one day desiring to be an alcoholic and addict and lose her life at 21. That came about from the friends and choices she made. Olivia took her first drink around age 13. Looking back, there were signs. Her friends changed in middle school. Her diaries talk about how badly she wanted to fit in. I once dropped her off at a friend's house, and when I returned, she was so intoxicated with alcohol poisoning that we went straight to the emergency room. Drinking caused Olivia to lose her virginity just before the 8th grade to a high school senior. Then she was so ashamed she drank more and tried to take her own life. Counseling helped for a while, but if she took one drink, she just couldn't stop. Olivia was a repeat offender. She got arrested, did drugs, wrecked a car, and became involved in an abusive relationship. Despite all the bad things, she still graduated early from high school with wonderful grades. When she wasn't under the influence, she was sweet, charming, and funny. At age 21, Olivia called and asked for help. We got her waitlisted at an inpatient treatment program. She was supposed to call daily to check for an opening, but Olivia stopped calling, thinking she could do it herself. 3 months later, she drove drunk, hit an embankment, and died the next day. Later, I learned that the parents of one of Olivia's closest middle school friends allowed kids to drink at home as long as no one was driving. I had no idea. I trusted other parents and put my head in the sand. I never wanted to believe that my daughter had a drinking problem or was less than perfect. Losing Olivia changed our family forever. The simplest things you take for granted become a monumental event, like setting the kitchen table, just holding that extra plate in your hand. I share her story because if one person chooses not to go down that same path, then Olivia's life and death have purpose. That gives me comfort.
Thank you. Next slide, Brooke. So MADD's mission really is to have no more victims. And we hope that by sharing these stories, we can get to a place with no more victims. Some people may wonder, we're MADD, we're Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Why are we talking about underage drinking? And we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 parts to our mission and why they're all so important. So obviously the first part of our mission is to end drunk driving. It's right in our name. We do that through a few ways, through working with law enforcement to make sure that there are strict rules and laws being enforced regarding drinking and driving. We also are working with technology to be able to, in the future, have cars be able to detect if someone is drinking alcohol. We also do a lot of educational work, whether it's with schools, with parents, or with offenders as well. And then a big piece of what we're doing too as our mission is to help fight drugged driving, because we know it's very common these days, between the opioid epidemic, between marijuana being legal in some states or medical marijuana. We do know that there are more people on the road who are driving drugged. We also know that sometimes people will say that they wouldn't drink and drive, but they don't see prescription drugs or marijuana or other types of drugs as being impaired. So we want to put that education out there too, that all impaired driving is illegal and dangerous and deadly. The third part of our mission is to prevent underage drinking, which is really what we're going to be talking a lot about today. That's a lot of the work that we do with parents and with teens. And there's really two reasons why we want to do that. One, we know that the earlier someone starts drinking, the more likely they are to develop problem use later in life. Someone who starts drinking at the age of 13 has about a 30% or 40% chance of developing an alcohol disorder, as opposed to somebody who waits till 21, who has about a 9% chance. And we know that that goes hand in hand with drinking and driving later in life. So in essence, by trying to prevent underage drinking, we also are preventing drunk driving down the road. We also know that over 4,300 teens, people under 21, die each year from alcohol-related incidents. And we want a future with no more victims. So we need to prevent underage drinking now, and that's why it's a part of our mission. And then the fourth piece, which will be a piece until there are no more victims, is supporting our victims of these violent crimes. Our victim services team is always available to be with families and victims to help them through the court process, to just call them on a difficult day. It doesn't matter how long it's been since the crash occurred or since the incident happened. Our victim service is always there, free of charge, to help. So I know that's not why we're all here tonight, but if anyone ever finds themselves being a victim or knows a victim, please have them reach out to us so that we can help them. Next slide, Brooke. Okay, so the program that you're viewing tonight is our Power of Parents program, which is a free program that we give throughout the state of Connecticut. We can do them virtually. We have them in person when the time is right again. We have live programs, we have taped programs, really any way we can get the information out. We also have a lot of educational material. So if someone isn't able to necessarily host a program but wants some information from us, please always contact us as well. And then our Power of Youth program, which is mainly done in community centers and schools. And that program really focuses on underage drinking, marijuana use. And we kind of do a similar format where we give a lot of information, but we also give real life stories, impactful stories to teens about underage drinking. So again, if anyone is ever interested in the future in any of those programs, or kind of how we could work with your school or your parent group or community center, whatever it is, please reach out to us. Next slide. So what we're going to work on tonight, what we're going to go through, we're going to first talk about the problem and consequences of underage drinking and marijuana use. Then we're going to talk about the role that teens, friends, and peers play, the role that adults play, the role that parents play, and then what we all can do today, tomorrow, and in the future to keep kids safe. And we do want to remind you, you'll hear us say this multiple times throughout the program, but you as parents really do have the power to make a difference. You're going to hear more about why that is later, but we want you to feel empowered in that way, that your kids actually are listening to what you say. They're watching you and they're listening. So you do have that power, and you should feel empowered by that. Next slide. Okay, so a little bit about the problem and its consequences. So it's probably not too much of a surprise to all of you that alcohol is the #1 drug of choice among youth. As I said before, teen alcohol use kills more than 4,300 youth every year. We're going to see it. We're going to talk about that a little bit more with a breakdown of what that is in a few minutes. And really the reason why that drinking age is 21, there's a real reason for it. And especially for parents, sometimes it might be hard for them to kind of understand it, because a lot of times parents were in that age range where it was 18, where it hadn't switched over to 21 yet. So there's that mentality of, well, it was fine for me. I'm fine. Why does my kid have to wait till 21? And really, one of the main reasons is research. Over time, research helps us to better understand an issue, right? We know that we didn't know much about smoking in the past, and now we know smoking is dangerous, right? Well, the same thing has come along when it comes to drinking. We have more research to show that the brain's not fully developed, into the mid-20s, and drinking underage can prevent that part of the brain from developing the way it should. It can kind of wire your brain for addiction. And then also we know that since that part of the brain that is last to develop is the part of the brain that deals with good decision-making skills, and since alcohol already lowers your ability to make good decisions, it's kind of a recipe for disaster for teens because they don't have that part of their brain kind of built up already to make a good decision. And then they're adding alcohol in, which is impairing their decision-making skills. And that's why a lot of accidents and even deaths occur. Brooke, next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the local statistics here in Connecticut. So these are kind of the most recent from this study that 2017-18 is kind of more of the most recent parts of this, but we don't have the new ones yet for 1920. But nationally, 19.3% of 12 to 20-year-olds had consumed alcohol in the month leading up to the survey. And here in Connecticut, we were above average, where 26.2% of 12 to 20-year-olds had consumed alcohol in the month prior to the study. And we can talk at the end, Margaret, you might even have more of like local statistics for kind of breaking it down in Fairfield County or in your specific cities, but this is kind of just Connecticut as a whole. According to the Set the Rules CT self-report, students, self-reported students found that 70% of 8th graders in Connecticut said alcohol was very easy or fairly easy to obtain. So that was 8th graders, that it was very easy or fairly easy to obtain. The 2019 high school risky behavior survey reports that 11.7% of high school students had consumed alcohol, more than just a few sips, for the first time before the age of 13. Now, remember what we had mentioned before about the earlier someone starts drinking, the more likely they are to develop problem use. So that number of 13 is really important. And 12.9% of students said that they had binge drank in the last 30 days. That was in Connecticut. Binge drinking, for anyone who doesn't know, would be 4 drinks for females and 5 drinks for males in kind of one sitting or in a matter of a few hours. So those are the statistics here. Kind of in all the categories, Connecticut ranks a little above average, and in some categories even higher above than average. We were actually just looking at New England as a whole, and most of the New England states were the top states when it came to underage drinking use and binge drinking. Next slide. Okay, so when we talked before about that 4,300 deaths that occur every year, one of the main things that people think are that those are all traffic related deaths. And really that's only 32% of the deaths related to underage drinking. And this is really important. This is a really important piece to, if you are a parent, to know, and if you work with parents, to get this information out to them, because many parents believe that if we take the keys, we take away all the risk. Right? I don't want anyone driving. They're going to come to my house. They're going to get dropped off, or they're going to give me their keys and they're going to stay, and everyone will be fine. And it's just not true. The other percentages, the other 2/3 of drinking related deaths come from homicides, suicides, poisonings, alcohol poisoning, drowning, fires, falls, and other. So it's really important to stress this to parents that it's not safe to just say, okay, let my kids drink in the home, especially during COVID. Parents may be feeling like, well, so much of it's been taken away from my kids. They can't go anywhere. Why don't we just have a few kids over, have them in the home, have them in the basement? It's not safe. And because we know these statistics, it's actually taken really seriously here in Connecticut. And we do have the social host law here in Connecticut because it's so dangerous to host a party. So the social host law says that if you are a parent and your child has a party in the home, you are responsible for what happens. It doesn't matter if you were there at the time of the party, if you know about the party, if you were the one who supplied the alcohol or the kids brought the alcohol, any of that, you are still held responsible if you do not make reasonable efforts to stop that party. And the fines and penalties can be pretty severe. It can be up to $2,000 of a fine. You can face jail time, especially if someone's injured or killed as a result of the party. There can be, you can have restitution that you have to pay, jail time, probation. If you have a felony on your record, loss of possibly of your job, finances, things like that. So it's taken really seriously here in Connecticut, as it should be. And it's, again, something to stress to parents that you're going to be held responsible for the choice that your kid made. And it's not enough to just say, I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on in my basement, or I went away for the weekend and I didn't talk to my kid about what could happen in the home. So you really need to have those conversations. I always encourage parents to use any means that you have. So whether you're going out for the night or you're going out for an entire weekend, have the neighbors check in, or, remind the kids, Aunt Susan's going to come over at some point this weekend. So I hope everybody's behaving. Or use if you have a Ring camera or some kind of security cameras to see what's going on outside of your home, if there's cars there or what's going on. Just use any of those things that you have to, and also talk to your kids too about what's expected. Because again, you're going to be held responsible for what they did. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Brooke now, and she's going to talk a little bit about the role of friends, and then go on to adults and other and parents.
Awesome. So yeah, so a lot of parents have misconceptions on what they should be worried about in their friend or their children's friends and peers' lives. So middle and high schoolers tend to overestimate how many teens actually drink alcohol. They think everybody's doing it. However, we know it's 1 in 7 teens binge drink. So if it was 6 and 7, that might be everybody's doing it, but it's only 1 in 7. However, they're frequently wrong, like I said, about who is consuming and how much is being consumed. So we need to be able to, as parents or even educators, change that misconception that these students are having, and know that it's not everybody is doing it, and that there's only a small portion of students that are, or their friends who are drinking. And it is a kind of peer pressure thing. There might be that one person that does peer pressure them, or it's this societal peer pressure where they're seeing it on TV, they're seeing it on social media. They're not seeing all those consequences that there are to underage drinking, and they're kind of missing out on seeing all of the repercussions that we kind of just talked about with social host law and things like that. They think that it's going to help them to fit in and be like other people, and that it's normal to drink. So one way to kind of make sure that you're having a good influence is making sure that you know, and that your teens know, that not everybody's actually doing it. And with that, um, comes the role of adults and even parents, which it might be on the next slide, but we have a statistic that says only 1 in 100 parents think that their teens binge drink. So there's a really big misconception on teens think everybody's doing it, and parents think that not that many teens are doing it. So being on the same page that more teens than parents think are doing it, but less teens than teens think are doing it, which is a really big societal thing that is happening, and making sure we know that it's not everybody, but it's more than no one. So the role of adults. Some of the misperceptions of adults are letting teens drink at home takes away the mystery of alcohol and decreases desire to drink. It's okay to provide alcohol to underage teens for special occasions and holidays. And they drank underage or used marijuana as a teen and turned out okay, so it's fine for their kids too. When in reality, decades of research has consistently proven that children and teens permitted to drink in the home often drink more outside of the home. They do it more often, and then they have more problems. You can't teach your child how to drink responsibly. There is not another drug in the world that you teach your child to do. You don't teach them how to do cocaine. You don't teach them how to do anything else. So there shouldn't be a reason. There really isn't a way to teach your teen how to drink responsibly. As Nicole talked about, the brain functioning, it causes these students, these children, I should say, to have more problems later on if they do start drinking at home. It kind of teaches your child that, oh, my parents think it's okay, so it must be safe to do. So when they go out, they think it's safe because, oh, mom and dad let me do it, so it must be okay to do. However, it kind of just makes it seem normal and safe to do, when in reality it's really not that safe. So you can't teach your child how to drink responsibly. So while parents have a huge impact on their teens, adults and the adults in their life, whether it be Olivia's friends' parents who let those 13-year-olds drink in their home. Those adults had a really big impact on Olivia's life, and it wasn't just parents. So parents and adults. So parents, adults, and peers all have the power to do something about underage drinking and make sure that we're all making the right decisions.
I just want to comment that I really like that example of saying, we don't teach our kids to use cocaine or whatever, because in so many towns, the conversation, we've got a heavy drinking population culture around here in a lot of these towns. And there's this concept that your kid's going to go to college and everyone's going to be drinking. So let's practice now so they don't, like, it's this literal concept that I've heard parents say, and at coalition tables, we're getting them ready for college so they're prepared. So your message is really good.
Yeah, when I first heard that, it clicked. It made sense. You don't teach heroin, you don't teach these things, so why would you teach that?
Okay, so I'm gonna pick it up from here. So we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of everything that's going on currently and what you can do during COVID. So what's really important as parents is to set a good example. So research shows that since COVID-19 social distancing began, the number of teens who are drinking and using marijuana has actually decreased, but the frequency has increased, and many teens are using it as a way to cope. So pretty much what this is saying is less teens are doing it, but the ones that are doing it more often. And that's the population that we really need to be focused on right now. So as an adult and as a parent, it's really important during any stressful time to set a good example with not only your actions, but with your words. So it's really important to, I know sometimes we just kind of think it's, you see memes about drinking and COVID or, things like that. And you think it's a joke, but your kids are watching. So when you say something like, oh, I can't wait for this day to be over so I can have a glass of wine, or dad just really needs to unwind with a few beers because this day was so stressful. Your kids are listening to that and they're associating a drink with stress. That at the end of the day, my reward is that I can have some alcohol and I will feel better. And we really don't want to set that message for teens. So really be careful about the words that you're choosing when it comes to how you want to de-stress. Finding more positive alcohol and drug-free ways to cope with stress and really pointing those out so that to say, what, mom was really stressed today, I'm going to go for a run, or do you want to come for a run with me? Whatever it might be, but just being really careful about those words, or thinking about too, if your kid has access to your social media page, think about what you're posting. Because yeah, memes may seem funny to share with your friends, but if your son or daughter is seeing that as well and thinking, oh yeah, mom's making a joke about wine, it's probably fine. You have to think about kind of what they're viewing as well. Next slide.
Here we go.
Okay, so what else we can do? So we know that 3 out of 4 teens say that their parents are the leading influence on their decision about drinking alcohol, whether it's to drink alcohol or to not drink alcohol. So when I said before, you have the power to make a difference, you have the power to make a difference. Over 75% of teens are saying we're listening to what our parents say. They're the ones that are helping us make this decision. So it's really important to use that power that you have to start those conversations, to not feel like, well, my kid never listens to me, or why is it even worth having this conversation? It's really important to have those conversations. And we really want to help guide you through that process by giving you our handbooks that we have virtually. We'll give you the links for the virtual ones. You can always also request physical ones as well. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on the next slide about what the handbooks have in them, but pretty much we break it down for middle school, for high school, and then we also have them in Spanish. And these handbooks aren't just kind of information that we just kind of put out there. This is real research that has been done over the course of many years. We worked with Dr. Teresi out of Penn State to he compiled all of his research to see what's the most effective in getting kids to drink less or to not drink at all. And his research found that the parents who use these handbooks going into, when their kids were seniors in high school, going into college, those teens that parents were giving the handbooks to and that they use them and talk to their kids, they actually had much lower rates of drinking in college or didn't drink at all. So there really is some research behind having these conversations and using these parenting tips. Next slide. Okay, so we're not going to go through the whole handbook or kind of what it entails, but I just want to kind of give you some of the highlights of what's in it. So really what this Power of Parents is about today is to kind of say, this is the problem and this is why it's important. And then for you to take this handbook, look it over, read through everything, and then have those conversations with your kids. The handbook will go into a little bit more detail about kind of the problem of alcohol, underage drinking these days. It will also talk about your teens world, whether it's your middle school world or your high school world, what's going on for them, to kind of, so that you can kind of step into their shoes for a minute to see kind of what's happening in their life, what's their perspective when you're going to be talking to them. And then we talk about the types of parenting. There's 4 main types, and the most effective type is the positive parenting, where there's actual conversations that go on. It's not just a everything goes kind of situation, or it's not a nothing, it's my way or the highway situation. A positive parenting situation is where we can have conversations about things. And we're not here to judge kind of what type of parenting style you have, but to just say that that's usually the most effective, the research shows, when having these conversations with your teens. So then the next part of the handbook talks about actually talking about alcohol use, helping your teens to make good choices, and to kind of help them with in the process of choosing their friends, and kind of talking through problems when they might have them, if they do have if they think maybe their friend has a problem, or they're just so that they can have good communication and come to you with their issues. And then we also, in this new handbook, this newly revised one, we talk a little bit about marijuana use as well and the dangers. One of the things that we really just want to point out quickly about marijuana use is it's not the same marijuana that we had back in the 70s or 80s or 90s. And that's why parents, again, like we said before, with parents who had earlier drinking ages back then, they also had a different kind of marijuana back then that did not have as much THC in it. So in their mind, again, their thought process may be, I did it, it wasn't a big deal, why can't my kid? And it is different now. And we really want to give them some information about today's marijuana and kind of the myths regarding marijuana as well. So that's all found in our handbook. It's one of those things that you really want to kind of go through it all first and then have those conversations. And it's not just a conversation, it's really conversations. It's a continued conversation with your kids. It's a check-in every now and then, or a what's going on, or what's going on with your friends, any of that. And one of the things too that you want to, when you open up these lines of communication with your kids and they feel like they can come to you, you might want to have a code word with them for if they're ever in a situation where they feel like they need to get out of it, but they can't necessarily, they don't want to be the one to call you up and say, hey mom, can you come get me? We had a story one time of a girl who she was out with her friends, and all of a sudden they met up with these other kids and they were going to go to a party. She knew there was going to be drinking and marijuana, and she just didn't want to go, but she didn't really in that moment have the courage to say, I don't want to go. This isn't right. So she sent a little text to her mom. Her mom called and said, hey, I know you're out. I know you're having a fun time right now, but I really need you home. Your brother has to be babysat. And, she kind of gave the, oh, mom, do I really? And then she was able to leave. So having those conversations with your kids too, that, we can have that code word, or you can make me the bad guy, right? You can tell your friends if you need to that mom's not going to let me go to prom if she catches me drinking. Make me the bad guy. I don't care, as long as it keeps you safe. Next slide. Okay, so that really is kind of wrapping it up. I just want to remind everyone again that you do have the power to make the difference. Your teens really are listening. And now we'll just open it up to questions or thoughts, comments, any of that.
Nicole, I do have a question for you. This is Kath. For communities where enforcement of the social host laws are not happening, has MADD taken any steps to maybe provide alternatives, like an educational program to parents? Or how do you respond to situations like that when there are underage drinking parties happening, but the laws are not being enforced?
So, well, I guess one of the things too is that sometimes we're not aware of that because it doesn't get to that step for us to know about it. One of the things that we really try to do through our SMART program, which is, it's a program for teens who've had their first offense related to either underage drinking, possession of alcohol, marijuana, or traffic violations unrelated to DUIs. We really want to get the word out about that program to, it's through the courts and the JRBs, but we also want to get the word out to police about that as well, because if they know that when they give out that ticket to a parent and a kid, that the first time around, they're going to be able to go to an education program and learn why they did what they did was wrong and why, and get a lot of really good education, and it's not going to ruin their entire life, then that officer might be more willing to want to give out that ticket, as opposed to saying, if I give this ticket, this kid's not going to get into college. And we don't want that. We don't want the rules to be so strict that people don't want to do anything about it because they're afraid they're going to ruin someone's life. So we actually have been doing a lot of education around that there is a program out there that, this isn't going to ruin everyone's life, but we really want to get them the right information. And actually, a lot of the teens who come to our program come unrelated to social host or alcohol use. And when we ask in the class, how many of you know about social host, it's alarming how many parents don't raise their hand, that they don't know about social host. Which also reminds me that we have a ton of cards. They're probably just like this big, little like notebook size, on social host that we are always willing to give out. And Margaret, we can talk about that more too, if you want me to give them to you when I give you the handbooks, but we always have that available too, because a lot of times it's just that the parents don't really even know.
Well, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
I was just going to say, so Nicole, so the SMART program is for youth. How about a program for parents who may be hosting an underage drinking party, or there's a party and they are totally oblivious to the fact that there's alcohol? Do you have the equivalent of SMART for the parents?
So yes and no. So they would, because if the kids are under the age of 18, for any of their offenses, they have to come with a parent to SMART. So for the most part, you're going to get that kid's going to get that minor in possession charge, and the parent's going to get the social host charge, and they're going to come to the class together. If it were something where the kid didn't get charged and the parent did, they're not going to filter through to us, but it's rare that it happens that way. Unless, of course, they were older, then it might not happen. If they were 19 or older, they don't have to come with a parent. So
I feel like
in that case, yeah,
I feel like they might have one time like made the parent come even when they weren't 18. I feel like that happened before, but I think it's
might
like
have been an exception, but yeah,
it's not normal for that to happen necessarily.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up with you, Nicole, on that. I think that sounds like a great idea.
As someone who, I have one kid who just got his license during the pandemic and the other one who's in driver's ed now. I don't know everyone else if you've already been there, done that, but there's that, if your kid is enrolled in Next Street or whatever, there's the one required 2-hour parent session. I see the heads nodding, right? Like you're supposed to go. And the whole reason that you're supposed to be there is it's a state requirement that the parent hears some of that impaired driving information at the same time as the kids. So what I noticed is my older son, who got the license first, my husband and I dutifully went to the, required 2-hour session, and the teacher did not talk about social host, actually imparted virtually no information, was done in a half hour, and was like, you guys have to sit here for 2 hours because that's the state requirement. And it was our first kid, so we didn't know what we were there for, right? We didn't know what we weren't getting. I mean, we were clearly like, we're paying for something we're not getting. But then my other son, who just started driver's ed, I went to the 2-hour thing with him, this month, and the teacher was covering social host, and she was covering a ton of stuff that would have been great. But I was like, wow, this is really the only way that you can kind of ensure that parents find out anything. And that's only for people who are paying for their kid to do driver's ed. Even then, the teacher that did cover the information, she was talking about social host law, and her impression was that you had to be the owner of the property where the kids were drinking. So I was able to say, you don't have to own it. The state law is you have to control the property where the kids are drinking. So if you are a tenant and they're drinking at a place, you control it. You're the person on the lease. You are now liable for whatever they were doing, whether you knew about it or not. So I think I just wanted to add that into when we're trying to figure out what we do, maybe we got to work with the driving schools but that's something to be aware of too, is that might be the only opportunity that a lot of parents have to get any of this information.
Right. And like we were saying before, it's so hard to capture parents to begin with. So what a great audience to have them there in that moment, and what a waste of time to say, sit here for an hour and a half.
Mhm.
We have nothing left to tell you.
Right, right. I saw Rennie.
Yes, I'd like to add that we've over the last couple of years, we've made a big push on making the social host law known in Fairfield. And we were really lucky with the public schools that when we had proms and other dances, they would actually print a copy of our social host flyer on the back of the permission slip. And it actually has cut down on parents willing to host underage parties in town. Not that they're still not happening, but not still happening, but it certainly has made a dent. And we also have a juvenile review board, and a lot of kids that have come before us have been sent to the MADD program.
I think, you know, the thing about social host law too, or what you just said about driving, is that graph, that pie chart that you guys had, I know that struck all of us in Westport when we saw that presentation, because everyone's thinking, if the kid's taking Uber home, they're not going to die, you know, and the fact that, you know, and people make efforts at graduation and prom. We're all thinking about like, when could the kids be celebrating and then driving? So I think it's a really important message that that's only a third of the deaths is the driving deaths. I think that's, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's not that we just want to scare parents, right? We want everyone to be aware. I think some of the most important messaging here is like, look how early kids start drinking and getting these messages. And I forget what exactly their statistic was about age 8. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, I'm guilty. I don't think we talked about refusal skills with my kids at age 8. I mean, we talked about alcohol and drugs here and there, but we weren't like practicing refusal skills with them at that age. And yet by 13, if most kids have been offered a drink, then like, you better hope they've practiced at some point. And I think health curriculum in schools is hit or miss. It's like, who's the teacher and did the district upgrade their curriculum anytime in the last 20 years and all of those things.
Absolutely.
And what I also try to tell my kids and their friends is, you know, these statistics you had are deaths, but it's not every tragic event results in death. Especially sexual assault is much more prevalent when there's alcohol or other drugs involved. And having older kids that have gone through college and kids at college, the prevalence is just so sad and frightening. And if we were to spend as much energy and time teaching our kids to have fun without substances than we do to, you know, post about at their 21st birthday, oh, look, their first legal drink, oh, this is so wonderful. We could have a much happier memory making experience for them.
Just to piggyback off of that, Brooke, you always know it better off your head than I do, but we give this information at SMART about a study from a 1-year study in colleges. And Brooke, do you want to give what the numbers were for assault and sexual assault?
Yeah, it was almost
that were alcohol related.
Yeah, almost 100,000 sexual assault and
700,000 assaults.
Yeah, 700,000, something like that. Assaults, meaning fights and those kinds of things. And then 1 in 4 students noticed academic decline too. So those are the 3 things that they looked at in that study. And I don't remember like how many people, obviously there were a lot of people in the study. It was a huge thing to get those numbers, but that's a lot of even one person being sexually assaulted or assaulted in general is too many. So
those were college age kids?
College age kids.
Yeah, it was a study of college age kids for 1 year, just a 1-year study. And it was, they were all alcohol related assaults.
Right, alcohol, yeah.
One thing I wanted to add to what you guys were saying about COVID and kids, you know, maybe using alcohol and marijuana a little bit less, or maybe fewer kids using because of access, right? Because they're at home and parents are seeing what they're doing, but those who are using more frequently. So the Nina and Emily, who are the evaluators that our coalitions work with, just did 28 focus groups around the state, including in our towns that are represented here. And one of the themes that they came up with from the kids that they talked to is that kids are we're really talking about alcohol and marijuana differently. So they're using alcohol out of boredom during COVID, and they're using marijuana for coping with stress. And they were really consistently talking about it in that way. So bored, take a drink, feeling stressed, feeling depressed, feeling worried, use some weed. And we know, well, maybe obviously we don't all know, but like, that's not good for your mental health. You might feel better temporarily, but it's making it worse.
Right. And you know what, it will be interesting to also see kind of a follow-up to the COVID statistics, because what we had was also like very early on in COVID. So that was kind of when everyone was scared and had to stay home kind of. So of course kids are going to have less access, but now, you know, a lot of time has gone by and we've realized now what we can and can't do more often. So now maybe kids are having their friends over outside or doing something different. So that it's probably actually going to creep up again, that kids are going to be drinking more again.
Wendy, did you start to say something earlier?
I was just going to say, I thought it was so powerful to hear that taking away the keys doesn't take away all the risks, because I've often heard the same thing. Well, we're going to have these people come and, you know, it's okay if they drink because we're going to collect all the keys. And in my head, I'm thinking, but are you watching the kids? What if someone has alcohol poisoning? You don't know, I mean, anything about all those kids or how their bodies react to alcohol. So to me, it's such a huge risk to be taking, let alone with your own child, but with other people's children. And I think there is that false sense of security in that as long as they're not driving, everything will be fine. So hearing that sentence, I thought, wow, that's really a great way to say it.
Wendy, are you a Fairfield parent, or where do you live?
In Fairfield.
Okay. And what do you hear from fellow parents? What are you hearing in terms of how they are responding to the whole underage drinking situation, alcohol in teens?
You know, most of the people I talk with they're not serving kids. They're trying to, I think with COVID, the thing that worries me, but I'm not hearing it from parents as much, just hearing it from other kids, is my daughter's friends feel like people are drinking more. So it's actually, I'm glad to hear that that's not what the statistics are showing, because of stress and everything else that's going on for them. But I have heard in the course of conversation, or just from, you know, other people, that whole concept of like, oh, well, we'll have a graduation party and we'll collect the keys, or it's before the dance and we'll collect the keys and then people can drink at this house. And that always is just very, very frightening to me.
And what messages do you think resonate with parents? What do you think what message do we need to get across besides everything?
I think these kinds of things, just hearing again, like about the social host law and talking about how you can't teach your kids how to drink. I think that was another thing that you frequently hear people say, oh, well, I don't want my child to go to college and not know how to drink and then get into trouble. And I think hearing in the presentation, you know, you don't teach your kids how to use any other drug. How are you going to teach them how to use alcohol? But I think it gets tricky with that, knowing that some kids are drinking, and if you're having conversations with them and you want them to come to you, and yet they're afraid because they know like it's not something that you condone, how do you keep the conversation going? That's always a tricky thing, I think. So I don't know if anyone has that they can speak about to that.
Well, open-ended questions. You know, what do you see? You know, what are your friends' attitudes toward drinking? I mean, you could start with those kind of open-ended questions. So maybe not necessarily specific to your own child, but so, you know, what are your friends doing at parties? You know, that kind of thing. And then, you know, and then you can kind of weave it in terms of your own hopes and fears and values and teachable moments and things like that. That way it's not coming across judgmental, you know,
Right.
which is really important, but you just want to have a conversation. So
Good idea. And then just still, it allows you to get a sense of kind of what's going on or
Yeah, yeah,
what
exactly.
kids are doing.
I always found that like in high school, kids would always like rat out one of their other friends and say, well, Mary was doing this, or, you know, Susan did that or whatever. And not, it's like, you know, everyone's probably doing the same things, but you're going to talk about when, you know, someone else did it. So
Or someone
yeah,
else
you might
has
get a
that.
feel for kind of what's going on by, or, you know, well, what happened to Mary after that? What did her mother say? What do you think I would have said if that happened to you, know, and kind of opening it up that way.
That's a good idea.
And Nicole and Brooke,
we've
your
always had
handbook
our-
has. Sorry, I was just
Yeah,
going to
we've
say that
always
the
had our,
handbook that you guys are going to get has suggestions for all of those things and conversation starters and stuff. So maybe if we take a second here, like Nicole and Brooke, do you want to just put the links to your handbooks in the chat, or do you want to send it out, or how do you want to do this? And we are going to have hard copy available as well.
We can do both, maybe. I can put it in
Yeah,
now.
you want to put it, well, let's put it in the chat. And then also we have a follow-up survey. So Margaret, if we can get the link and the survey out to you and you can put that in an email afterwards too.
I'll put the survey in now because I have that open, but then I'll get the handbook. Sorry, I forgot the word.
And I apologize. I just have to jump off to get the baby to bed because he's at his limit right now. But Brooke will be on to handle any other questions or anything that might come up. But thank you guys so much. And I'm glad we were able to have like a conversation at the end and kind of talk about what's going on. And it's always good to hear kind of in specific towns and areas too, because us being in all of Connecticut, we don't really get a sense sometimes of what's going on very specifically locally. So thank you all.
You.
Thanks, Nicole. So, okay, you guys, if you can see the chat, Brooke gave you a link to, is that the middle school or high school handbook?
That one is our survey that
The survey.
we just collect information on where you guys are from and just have it there just in case we want to send out like a reminder of a new addition to the handbook or stuff like that, if there's anything new. And then I'm grabbing the links from my email for the handbooks, and I'll put which one it is when I put them in so that you guys know what they are.
And Wendy, I know I have your email because you RSVP'd for this. Leanne, do I have your email to send you stuff afterwards?
Yes, you do.
I do, okay.
Fill out the contact form. That was-
I can't hear you. I heard you say yes, though, but.
I just filled out the contact form.
Oh, great, okay.
Yeah, so if there's an email you don't have, I'll have it if that's filled out. So here is the, what did I just copy? The high school one is coming out first. And then the middle school one. All of that information is the same, I think, as Nicole said, but like middle schoolers and high schoolers, oops, that didn't, there it is in a clickable form, but just a lot changes between middle school and high school. So just kind of like what's happening in school, what they're doing, brain development too is really in that 8-year span can really, between that beginning of middle school and the end of high school, can really be a lot. And I mean, even
Big difference.
yeah, even if you're or somebody you know has like a freshman in college or about to be a freshman in college, the high school one is definitely still relevant for anybody like that age that needs to have this conversation. There's not really a limit on it. The tips can help. You can probably help talk to 20-year-olds and 25-year-olds too. It's just geared towards being more preventative instead of doing it right before college. Let's start in middle school and high school so that it's already not happening, which is pretty cool.
Did anyone have any other questions for Brooke? I want to make sure we gave everybody an opportunity here.
You can always email us too.
Oh, do you want to put your email in the chat too then?
Definitely.
And one thing I was thinking about is, you know,
Nicole.
just to those of you, especially if you're not working in prevention, like, do you feel like you know the definition of binge drinking? And is that something you've talked about with kids separately from general conversations about alcohol? Because it's pretty common, binge drinking. So do you feel like you know what binge drinking is?
I want to make sure, I mean, I always thought the binge drinking was drinking a lot of alcohol at a fairly quick succession. So I know they were saying it was like 4 drinks for a female, 5 drinks for a male in one sitting.
Yeah,
Um,
they often define, and one sitting is really basically within 2 hours.
okay, I was gonna say, is there like a time window? Because I always think of it
Yeah.
as being not over the course of an evening, but more rapid
Right.
fire. Okay.
I mean, the reality is it takes your body about an hour and a half. They used to tell us an hour, but more recently I've read it's like an hour and a half to process the equivalent of 1 drink.
Oh,
And so
wow.
some of the messaging to kids has to also be, it's like, what is 1 drink? It's
Right.
all that stuff about how, like, do you know about the markers on the Solo cup?
Right.
And you know that you're, and like when we as adults go out to a restaurant and we get a drink, you get a cocktail and it's basically the equivalent of 2 to 3 drinks because they bring you these giant glasses. So it's really, all of us realizing that we're probably, every time we have 1 drink, it's probably more like 2 official drinks.
Yes.
And then how big is your body and how many of these did you have in what period of time? And, it might be 6 hours before that stuff's out of your body. And then like you take these kids who have 0 tolerance maybe, and they're little, they don't have all that weight that us middle-aged people put on. And, it's not a good fit. There was a kid, this might now be about 10 years ago, but there was a boy from Greenwich and he went to college in, I think, Colorado. And he was trying to get into a fraternity and he was like 6 weeks into his freshman year and they did a hazing ritual and he ended up dying of alcohol poisoning. And his family made a movie called Haze. I don't know if anyone here has seen it. It gets shown every once in a while. And there are scenes from the beginning of that have always stuck with me because they went around, they got their documentary people to go to some colleges during non-quarantine times and take videos of kids like at a party, freshman party, drinking. And there were like kids like, standing on cars with hoses from like huge funnels, just pouring like from a gallon jug of vodka into this thing. And it's just like going down into a hose into people's necks, and they're just guzzling just crazy amounts of liquor at one time. Really, really horrifying to see that was happening. And I think one of the messages was kids today often are drinking, it might be different during COVID, but like they are drinking to get drunk, like right off the bat. Like you go to the party, I've heard kids say this, you go to the party and you're handed a joint and a Solo cup and you get stoned and you get drunk right away. And that's how you start the party. Layla, you're shaking your head, you're nodding. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's like when I was in college, it was you drink to get drunk, basically.
I think that speaks to the point exactly of the conversation we were having before about how you can't teach your kids to drink,
Right.
because I don't think teenagers are drinking for the most part for the same reasons that an adult might have a drink. That's, so it's not a similar comparison. If kids are drinking to get drunk, I mean, I'm not saying that some adults might not be doing that, but
Right.
for the most part, you're saying if someone's having a glass of wine, I don't think their goal is always to be drunk. And so it's very different.
Right.
The mind is different.
Yes.
And then it's hard because then you think, okay, but so if you go to a party and everyone there gets drunk as fast as possible and you're the one who's sober, so now it's not just refusal skills, like you need to have a different way of, like, what's your social scene? Like there's a lot of conversation and strategizing around all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so I just want to say, Layla, when she's talking about college, like you only just graduated from college recently, so that's like freshman, like a recent experience to share. So I know we've lost a few people, and we were going to end by 7:30, but there was still some discussion. I really appreciate this. So I guess if let me just say one more time: any last questions to impinge on Brooke's time?
Anything ever comes up, you can always email us. So.
And Wendy, you're on, or Wendy and Leanne, are you guys both on Riney's Fairfield list, so you get stuff from
Yeah.
her about, okay. Leanne, are
Yeah.
you also in the Fairfield list, or what town are you in, Leanne?
Norwalk, I got the information from Brian McMahon, sent it out.
Oh, okay, good. So, you know what, if I stop recording, then